We're in Switzerland is listening today because Mum from Gillingham in Dorset says, many happy returns, Alison. Bonjour, on longer wave. Hello.
Ed Stewart, as so many of us remember him on the radio, he was born in 1941 in Exmouth in Devon, and he was sent to school at the public school St Edward's in Oxford, where his former wife Chiara, with whom I had a wonderful conversation earlier this week, tells me that one of his favourite aunties said the sign of a great man, Ed, is to go to school for the start of a new term with money in your pocket, and when you finish at the end of term, you still have the same amount of money in your pocket. Those of us who know Edward will know that his idea of an outrageous evening was to make sure that anybody but him actually paid for it. Are we being unfair, Paul Burnett? I'll come to you in a moment. David Hamilton, who couldn't be with us today, came out with the immortal line, "What is the difference between Ed Stewart and a coconut?" Well, the answer very simply, ladies and gentlemen, is you can get a drink out of a coconut. But this is not to be fair. When I joined Radio 1 in 1978 and was given on a Friday night a sports programme, I lived under the illusion that I was the first person on Radio 1 ever to have presented a sports programme. That, 30 years on, I am reminded, is palpable rubbish, because the first man to present Sunday sport on Radio 1 in around 1975 was my dear friend Ed Stewart, who yesterday, when John Terry equalised for Chelsea, will have been sitting up in heaven alongside Howard Kendall and Alan Ball, and he'll probably have said something very rude, because he was a devoted Everton fan. There have been tributes galore, and rightfully so. None better, I think Paul will agree with me, than from Noel Edmonds, who this week publicly stated that without Ed Stewart, he might never have had a broadcasting career. Noel gave a tape to Ed, Ed gave the tape to Kenny Everett gave it to the powers that be, and a career was born, which is a lovely story and very honest, I think, of Noel. So from St Edward's, Oxford, out into the big wide world, and then to Hong Kong, where he started his broadcasting career on Radio Hong Kong, and then returned to good old Blighty, tried at Radio Caroline. Ronan O'Reilly and the gang said, "No thank you, Mr. Edward Stewart Mannering," to give him his full name. That's right, isn't it, Ed? Yes, Edward Stewart Mannering, yes. Radio London, run by Philip Birch and Alan Keane, thought differently, and on the boat he went. Thank goodness. He landed up being senior disc jockey. When the great Tony Windsor left Radio London, Ed was made senior presenter, a role which I think he thoroughly enjoys. And then on to Radio 1. And before Paul joins me, I do remember with great affection the day that we went on a Radio 1 week out to Wales. We met at Broadcasting House at 9 o'clock in the morning, and all of us got on a coach which was going to drive us to the great Principality and to the city of Cardiff. As we approached the toll, various of us, who should be nameless, connived to wind up Ed. "What shall we do?" we said. "Let's tell him that he has got to pay the toll fee." The sort of thing which would make Ed faint on the spot. Anyway, we got away with it. We talked to the driver, and it went like this. As we pulled up at the toll, the driver said, "Ed Stewart, money for the toll, please." Ed, looking very white and pale, produced, I think, a £5 note from his back pocket and said, "There we are." And the driver said, "What's that?" He said, "It's £5 for the toll." The driver said, No. He said, "It's £5 each." There were 36 of us on the coach, and we had to revive Ed for a great period of time. Will you welcome, please, my dear friend and old colleague, Paul Burnett. what do we remember of this man who we're doing it lovingly, but for goodness sake, he dined out on this, didn't he?
You forgot to mention that the pound note that he pulled out from his back pocket was one of those big white ones that have been out of circulation for 40 years. Anyway, no, you know, we're painting a picture of Ed as being mean, and he was a bit time and money, but he was very generous with his time. And what you said about Noel Edmonds' tape, now you and I, be honest, if we'd been given a tape, well, this guy sounds good, I'm not going to give that bloody thing to anyone. I mean, you know, you've got your own job to think about there. No, he was like that. That's what he would do. He's very, very generous. However, having said that, I have to say, the first time I met Ed, I joined Radio 1 in 1974, and I was doing a weekend show, and he was in the studio across the corridor doing Junior Choice, and he very kindly came in to wish me well, you know, welcome to Radio 1 and all that. And just as he was going, I said, have you got a quid on you? I've got a cab outside, he just arrived to do. I go, okay. And then without second thought, I gave him the quid. For the next 30 years, he reminded me, I haven't forgotten, I owe you a quid. And you know, trick his word, he never did. He never forgot that he owed me a quid. That's the kind of guy I was. On a sad note, may I just say that I personally just moved down with my wife to Bournemouth. We're living in Bournemouth now. And Ed was just up the road, and I was so looking forward to sharing some good times with Ed, because he was good company, wasn't he? He was great company. Larger than life. And I pressed the answer phone just the other day, and I was erasing old messages that were there. There was one, it was only from 2 weeks ago, Ed saying, you probably don't like them, but would you like to come and see The Bachelors? They're appearing in Poole. He loved The Bachelors. I'm not that keen. I'm not that keen. They're fine, you know, sold lots of records. So I'm sorry now. I would have loved to have a night out with Ed, watching The Bachelors, me teasing him about his love of The Bachelor, and I didn't. But his last words were, never mind, we'll do it again. And it's a reminder to all of us, you know, as we, you know, you're all kids here. Look at them. Look at these young faces staring back at us. But you'll come up to a time and you'll need to remember, don't turn down any chance you have, you know, when you get to a certain age. Oh, I'm going on more than him now. He'd be laughing his socks off, wouldn't he? He'd be laughing his socks off at this. But he was a generous, lovely guy, and we miss him. And a great broadcaster. He was a great broadcaster. Very distinctive. When they played that clip just now, somehow you don't hear voices like that. So, you know, you tune into the radio, Radio 2, God bless them, still do, but you tune into the radio, and to me, there's a lot of similarity between them. It's not their fault, it's the way radio stations are run these days. I'm just getting off my soapbox and hand back to you. But thank you for coming tonight, by the way, or this afternoon. Is it night or day? I don't know. No idea. How long have we been here? It seems like, you know, forever. I don't know. Are you going to sing now?
Hopefully not. Hopefully not. Just a word about Junior Choice. I heard Tony Blackburn earlier this week. Applause, applause, applause. Paul Burnett, ladies and gentlemen. I was going to get him to take a bow. Do you feel awful? You feel really awful, don't you? Junior Choice, Tony Blackburn said earlier this week that whilst he loved doing the programme, he could never do it as well as Ed. And I think that's very honest, because Ed just had the right hands-on approach to the programme and made it his own. For those of us who are as old as Paul and I, we grew up with a great broadcaster called Derek McCulloch. Now Derek you knew as Uncle Mac on Children's Favourites, and to follow him for Ed was pretty difficult, but he did it, and he did a great job. I have one message to convey from somebody who would love to have been here today, and this is sadly ironic. Paul's boss, my boss, our second boss at Radio 1, after the late Derek Chinnery, was Johnny Beerling. And I spoke to Johnny yesterday. Johnny desperately wanted to be here today, and this is so poignant looking at Ed. Johnny suffered a stroke just before Christmas, from which, thank God, I can tell you, he is recovering. Yesterday he went out for a 50-minute walk along the riverbank in Skipton in Yorkshire and put a photo on Facebook, and he looked really good. but I can't tell you how moved he is about what has happened to Ed. Ladies and gentlemen, can I ask you just for a moment to be silent in memory of Ed Stewart? Could we ask everybody in the house, please, to observe a few seconds silence in memory of Ed Stewart? Please, quiet up there. Just for a moment or two, to respectfully remember Edward Stewart Mannering, a great broadcaster. Thank you. And now for those of you who are real radio aficionados, I'm very much indebted to Sean Tilley for sending me a plethora of Ed Stewart recordings during the week. I started listening back to them, and the one we're about to play you is rather eerie and very strange, given everything that has happened in the last 2 weeks. Just have a listen to Ed Stewart presenting Newsbeat on Radio 1.
And on the Tea Time Newsbeat, we'll be meeting the young wife who's been named as Britain's champion butty maker. As the underwater experts report on what went wrong for Pisces 3, we ask, how safe is it for our divers? And if you think our prices are going up fast, listen to the problems of a country where everything has gone up 5 times in price this year. Yeah, David Bowie's back in the news again, and this time it's his hair that's caused the problems. Down in Bournemouth, a Bowie fan has been banned from school because of a blue and yellow Bowie hairstyle. But that's nothing compared to the problems of Andy Sharp up in Derby. Andy had his hair dyed flaming red and got a flaming rocket from his headmaster, who sent him home to scrub. But getting rid of the Bowie...
It's an amazing irony, isn't it, ladies and gentlemen, that we should find that. I just hope most sincerely that there is a showbiz bar in heaven, that Ed is having a drink with David and all his football mates. Thank you so much for listening. Huge thank you to Paul Burnett. God bless you, Ed Stewart, and thank you for everything you did on the radio. Thank you.
Andy Peebles and Paul Burnett. Thank you very much, guys. Please, Paul. No, Ben Sherman's not coming. Please sit in his... Sorry?
He promised he'd be there. Ben! What can he do?
Paul Burnett. I always thought, Paul, you know, a lot of these guys are my heroes. Tony Blackburn, Emperor Roscoe, I love them all. But Paul was the most naturally funny, gifted DJ who you could put on the radio with a bunch of records and he could just make a show any day of the week. Paul Burnett never had a bad day on the radio. Paul Burnett, everybody.